we shall get into our first topic then. And would you be happy to pay higher energy bills to help save the planet? 0207 862 2222. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Now, the government is sticking to its pledge to provide carbon neutral energy by 2030. The Prime Minister is expected to say later this week that it will save customers hundreds of pounds a year. But there's a warning today that households will have to accept higher energy bills in the meantime. Energy experts say that prices will have to go up to cover upfront costs of wind turbines and solar panels. What do we think of that? Are we all right with our energy bills going up even further, James?
Absolutely not. This is an absolute nonsense. So, should we have alternative means of producing power? Yes. Have we had those in the past but we've squandered them, for example, nuclear? Yes. The consumer is already having to pay all sorts of extra money in order to line the pockets of whether it's government through tax or energy companies through excess bills and prices. And by the way, we don't get any benefit from the fact that we've changed to, for example, wind turbines or anything else, because you can't choose the sources of energy that you have. We keep being told it's cheaper. We keep being told it's going to be better for the environment and for the planet. It's probably not. What we do makes little or no difference. And having these false and almost quick targets, pushing people to the alternative before we're ready. Should we be moving to alternative sources of energy? Yes, we probably should. Should we do it in a way that is beneficial to people? Look, through the taking away the subsidy for older people for their energy bills, we're already pushing people into fuel poverty. I don't want to see people up and down this country not being able to light their homes or heat their homes. We should be focusing, for example, on reducing bills by not having standing charges, which are unfair. We should be making sure that people who genuinely need help with their energy get it. Energy is both an essential and a luxury. By all means, those who use energy as a luxury, charge them more for it if you must. But for an essential, we should make sure that people have access. This is a nonsense, it's a false target, and we are doing it too quickly and in a way that is not going to help the consumer. I think this is a nonsense.
We are in a cost of living crisis, and we're hearing about pensioners that are going to have to choose between heating and eating this winter. We're also hearing about, almost a quarter of children living in poverty. Is now the right time to be asking us all individually for more money for green energy?
Storm, when you ask me a binary question and I like to walk you around the houses, literally.
Yes.
Let me take you by the hand and
Thank
do
you.
Precisely that.
Can't wait.
First of all, if we could just look at the top line. I couldn't sleep last night because I put on Radio 4's World Tonight. Syria, France, boof, it was like being hit around the head with an Armageddon of terrible, scary news stories, more war.
Snooze fest.
Right. The world is a scary place. But do you know what the great big existential crisis that comes over the top, even of Russia and Iran, is this giant climate change. And the great problem is there's always something more acute, more pressing, unless, of course, you were in Valencia a month ago, unless, of course, you were in Pakistan last year. And actually, in terms of cost-effective behaviours, do you know how much Britain spends per annum on flood defences and prevention? Guess. And
Billions.
Management. 2.2 billion pounds
Not
a year.
enough.
So not to do anything costs us. I also want to say, I understand that when you're hit with a levy for so-called, as the likes of James would call it, greenwashing, it's like a punch in the solar plexus.
Can I ask you a question, though?
Yeah.
Because you are connecting directly what Britain does with, of course, the climate change that we're all seeing and
we're
flood
all on the
defence.
same planet.
That's as maybe. But you're asking the British consumer to make choices that other people who, unless they take those choices, it's going to make scrapple difference. So, for example, America, we've got a new president coming in. You may or may not like him. Chances are they're not going to do anything to change. Their fuel use is going to determine what happens. So what we do is irrelevant. And you might say, but we must take the moral lead. So I just want to understand, why do you connect the two things which are unconnectable?
I connect the two things because I think we had a brief, dark period in the last few years when I don't think we've provided effective moral and otherwise leadership. But generally, we are privileged in this country in so many ways, and it is incumbent on us with access to wind, to wave, to
Look at those things, they're ugly.
To lead the future. But
Horrible. We're ruining our countryside with those ghastly things.
They are a bit
But in
ugly.
20 years, they're obsolete.
It's much uglier to be killed alive in your car when a great big wave takes you out in, of all places, Spain. Just quickly, I'm talking from experience. I'm actually being hit by a massive green levy in my mum's house in Scotland. Totally unforeseen. I had no idea that to rent out a house in Scotland, just to a long-term tenant, you need to be environmental level 4, D. And the house has come in at F, and it's going to cost me thousands of pounds I don't have. So I get it, and I myself...
Some insulation, a new boiler, and
they're
that sort of
saying
thing.
I can't rent it out until I wrap the
All
whole
right.
house in a new layer.
OK, so these sorts of taxes are already being put on people across the country. I do want to speak to Tessa Can now, founder and executive director of Uplift, an NGO which supports a rapid and fair transition away from gas and oil production in the UK. Tessa, higher bills, is that something we're going to just have to accept if we want clean energy?
Thanks so much, Storm. Great to be with you all. Listen, in short, our energy bills were among the highest across Europe 2 years ago, and indeed up until today. We still have exceptionally high energy bills in the UK, and that is because of our dependency on gas. It is our dependency on gas in particular that is why why 7 million people were pushed into fuel poverty in the winter of 2022, for example. It's the fact that we rely on gas to heat our homes, that it forms a chunk of the energy that generates electricity. So it is absolutely imperative. If you are serious about keeping people warm in the winter, about keeping down our energy bills, the only way to get there is to transition to renewable, clean sources of energy. And indeed, in 2022, the cost of generating electricity from wind power, for example, was 10 times cheaper than the cost of generating it from gas. And that is because, it doesn't matter that we produce oil and gas here in the UK. That is a product that's sold on international markets. International markets set those prices. And as we know very well, we are in an internationally volatile, as Tessa's alluded to already, an incredibly volatile geopolitical time.
OK, Tessa,
Russia's on the march. There's conflict in the Middle East.
Tessa,
so really the only route to cheaper energy bills in the longer term is clean energy.
OK, Tessa, I'm just feeling an objection from James, and I think it might be in the part that actually in 2020 we've seen more of our energy coming from renewable sources, which was great. But unfortunately, since 2020, we have seen our gas and electricity bills absolutely skyrocket. So although it may be true that the energy coming from renewable sources is in fact cheaper, we at home and the viewers at home are not feeling that. They are not seeing the realities of that. So I'm going to go back to the initial question I asked you, and that is, if we want clean energy, do we have to accept in the short term, at the very least, we are going to have to pay even more for our electricity?
Storm, that is 100% a political choice. So the reason, for example, that our electricity prices are high right now is because they're tied to the price of gas. For technical reasons, it's the way our electricity markets are currently structured. It's not the way it's necessarily going to have to be structured. It's not the way that it's structured in other countries. If the government is going to build significant or support the building of a grid upgrade that we need to do as a once-in-a-generation project to get cleaner energy, as I said, in the longer term, it has a choice about how it finances those costs. Interest rates are coming down. It can borrow to invest. It can choose to shift those additional costs.
Tessa.
I completely agree with James, actually, about shifting, for example, standing charges off our energy bills. I work with fuel poverty campaigners, and they agree that the government has a choice about who pays for these costs and where and how we make sure that we protect consumers in the meantime.
Tessa,
it can be done.
Sorry to interrupt, but I can't understand how you're applying your maths, because first of all, you're right to say that gas prices are tied to energy prices, but when anybody else creates something new, you don't pay the cost up front. You almost get a subsidised price on the way in, and yet we, the consumer, are being told that we have to pay in order to reach our green targets, which is the wrong way round. And the second point is that this country could produce a lot of cheaper energy, both through gas, through fracking, through nuclear, and we have chosen, whether through political or other means, to devastate our industries. So all of this stuff that you talk about is nonsensical. The consumer gets no benefit. Right. And if you want the consumer to go green, make it cheaper.
OK, Tessa, I'm going to let you come back on that, but I do want to get to calls. Tessa, you can have your say to James.
Great. So in short, we simply cannot do anything politically to increase gas production in the UK because the North Sea is a dwindling geological reserve. That is an inexorable physical reality of the North Sea. North Sea gas production peaked about 20 years ago. There's no going back. In fact, if you were to max out the amount of licensing that you did for new oil and gas, it would add 3 days worth of additional gas. It would meet 3 days worth of additional gas demand a year between now and 2050. What we do have in the UK is some of the world's best renewable energy resources, including Europe's best wind resources. And that's what it is incumbent upon us, leaving aside even the question of how we stave off the catastrophic impacts of flooding that we've seen just in the last week in the UK. It's imperative that we get those resources online for British consumers and for the British economy.
OK, I'm going to go to calls. Sarah from Surrey, what's your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are absolutely not. I totally agree with James. There are two things to look at here. One is global, one is national, local, if you want to say that. But, you know, when we're looking at emissions and things, we need to be looking at very wealthy countries like China and India, who have a far bigger impact. I've totally agreed with doing my bit personally with regards to recycling and whatever. But at the end of the day, this 5-year limit that we have given, or we have been given, is totally, well, it's in the birds.
Okay.
At the moment, how much more can you squeeze the average person in the UK?
Sarah, I actually think Tessa would maybe agree with you on that, in the way that she thinks that it's a political choice, that it's the government's decision on where they claw back the cash, or they claw the cash from, in order to pay for renewables. And actually, she doesn't think that charging us money for our gas and electricity is the right way to do it. Putting green levies on it is the right way to do it. And as for China, I mean, there's an argument to say that we export our carbon footprint to China. How many times do you order something online? Maybe not you personally, but people in general order something online and it's made in China. Well, that's just exporting the problem. So again, we are part of the problem in that. Tessa?
First of all, I'm loving the Tessa echo chamber.
Yeah,
How do you feel being enveloped in this love bubble of hot air from Tessa?
What do you call a group of Tessas? A rubbish of Tessas, as they just talk nonsense. I've never heard such rubbish.
But I think the key here is we have a chance to be world leaders. As Tessa so eloquently explained, we have the natural landscape, the sea. We are an archipelago. We are a set of islands.
Yeah, we're ruining our countryside with these things.
But we are perfectly set up to capitalise on wind, on wave. We can take this forward and lead from the front.
Sure, but would you agree with me? But the way to do that is actually to disconnect and allow consumers to choose and say, look, your energy from a wind farm is going to cost you this, or if you choose to have gas or oil or anything else, it's going to cost you X plus. So if you allow consumers to choose, they will choose based on cost. If you charge them more, no one's going to be in favour of it.
Do you not pay, I pay an opt-in, by the way. I pay a little bit more to be greener on my electricity bills.
Well, then more for you.
But I'm now going to stop because I'm having to wrap my house around with this very expensive...
Well, because you've got another green levy to pay.
Yeah. Exactly.
Broderick from London, what's your view when it comes to our energy bills and whether they're going to go up?
Well, they always go up. You know, you might say, oh, they might go up, but they always do. Definitely always do go up. So why can't they drop the pensioners out? People should pay if, when it starts, from the age of 18 to 50 and leave the old age pensioners alone.
So you don't have to pay any gas and electricity?
Sorry?
So pensioners wouldn't have to pay any gas and electricity?
No, they just pay the normal price.
Oh, and you put a levy on everybody else?
Yeah, because they're young enough. They can keep...
But,
you know.
but Broderick, a quarter of our children are potentially living in poverty. So that could be hitting the youngest in the youngest in our society as well.
But if you look at it as a whole, if the world's going to cease to exist,
Broderick,
it will.
there's less pensioners living in poverty than there are children, percentage-wise.
I feel very sorry for those. I'm sorry.
I know, but
point.
I'm just saying that we might not be protecting all of the most vulnerable in society with that theory. What about the fact that the government says that actually, if we invest and we put money in and we get to their targets in 2030, all of our household energy bills will go down by £300.
I don't trust these governments. I don't trust these governments. The way they're spending money on other things and not doing renewable energy. I just don't trust any government.
OK, Broderick, thank you very much for your call. Graham from Aberdeen, what's your view on this?
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Hello, panel. How are you doing?
We're all good, thanks. What do you think about the potentials for your energy bill going up?
It is an absolute nightmare. I've worked offshore 30 plus years. I'm not working at the present. I am trying to get universal credit at the moment. Nothing's working. We're trying to get what do you call that again? Electric cars beside me. That's not going to happen because I live as four doors along from me, 4 doors up from me, where the car parks are. How are they going to put recharging points in to this?
Well, Graham, this is part of the point.
We cannot do without gas or oil.
I've got you. But this is the point, is that you're absolutely right. The infrastructure needed to make electric vehicles viable across the country for everybody is going to be very expensive. The infrastructure needed to mean that we have complete energy independence in this country, and it's all coming from renewable sources, is going to cost money. So I'm asking you, Graham, whether you are willing to fork out for that. Are you willing to pay more to make that happen by 2030?
Well, Storm, I am now 63-year-old. I've had a nice letter from the government saying that I'll have to work another 3 more years before I can retire. I cannot afford to. How can I say? I cannot afford
to pay higher energy bills. I've got you, Graham. I think a lot of people are feeling the exact same way. But if Tessa can, I have to now define who I'm talking to. If Tessa can, if you're right, then maybe the government's going to have to find that money elsewhere. Maybe they have a plan for it because they're not talking about it going up. They're talking about it coming down.
They promised 28 billion. Got into power, the reality bit, and now it's 15 billion for their green pot. So the point is, in the end, the buck will stop with us because the government will look to cut costs and they'll put the cost on the consumer. That's what always happens.
Well, that's an optimistic way to end that part. Graham, thank you for your call. Thank you, Tessa Can, for joining us for that discussion.